So there are several things, but kind of to highlight some of the bigger things for Texas is we don't have state income tax. So working in Texas, you don't have to pay state personal income tax. It's just a single level payroll tax for your employers, which is the SUTA, the SUI unemployment insurance. In Texas, there's no mandatory workers' compensation. There's no city or local taxes either. Um, and it's pretty simple, simplified registration and reporting for the state of Texas as far as getting your TWC account set up for that. And then also, as far as minimum wage, we adhere to the federal rate for minimum wage here in Texas. The biggest thing we see is misclassifying, between a W-2 employee and a contractor. Um, that's usually what we see the mistakes are in. But there's other ones too. Failing to track and pay overtime correctly, depending on your pay periods. Some errors in tax withholding and reporting, depending on who's doing that, because we know owners and people can get really busy, and um, those errors can happen. Missing the payroll or tax deadlines, going kind of back to the tax payments. Just simple inaccurate record keeping, knowing that you got to keep W-4s and I-9s on file. Mishandling wage garnishments is another one. How to get those paid and paid timely. Um, and then allowing time theft or buddy punching. Um, you know, employees clock in and out for each other. It's kind of another one we see in how we help people. There's kind of five main kind of aspect categories, and then you kind of break it down from there. But first, control. So that's kind of the biggest one is uh, if the employer controls how and when the work is done, they're an employee. An independent contractor, they control how and when work is done. Tax withholding is another category. So, if the employer withholds, federal, state, local taxes, then they're an employee. Independent contractors, file their 1099s at the end of the year and pay their taxes then. Benefits is one of the ones we see a lot. So, employees will receive, PTO, retirement plans, health, medical insurance, things of that nature. If they are an independent contractor, they're not eligible for those types of employee benefits. Regulations. So employees are subject to all the labor laws, minimum wage, and overtime rules. Independent contractors are not covered by that. They're just paid basically flat rates to do their job. Tools and equipment. So an employee, the employer provides an employee with tools and equipment to get the job done. If you're an independent contractor, the contractor provides their own tools and equipment to get it done. Are some of the key highlights to the differences. First and foremost, it's localized service and personalized service as well. Um, since we're in the area, we meet with all of our clients and are able to tailor and customize their setup to how they want it. Um, Allowing for customized payroll schedules, integration with POS systems, unique general ledger setups. We just provide specialized payroll services, to all types of companies and businesses, construction, hospitality, restaurants, um, things of that law. So also, we're an expertise in Texas payroll law, being based here in Texas. So, um, and, unlike your big box providers, we're unique in a sense of you have a dedicated team to do that you'll work with. We don't have call centers um, to deal with. Basically, you'll call in, you'll get a live person every single time. If you send an emails, you're going to get a response usually within 30 minutes is our typical turnaround time. So it just makes it more personalized to do that. And as far as pricing goes, we don't have a all in one kind of pricing there. It's tailored to what your company wants. So we're not making you purchase things or pay for things that you're not going to utilize because it's part of the package. We really sit down, talk with our clients, figure out what it is that they're looking for. If they're unhappy with their current provider, why, and then how can we be of assistance to them to make sure they're up and running right. So kind of goes back to so then that owner or payroll person, HR person can really focus on their task within um, their jobs there and grow their own business and then leave payroll and everything else to us. Really easy. We kind of treat it as a white glove approach. Like I said, just figuring out the needs assessment and planning, defining the goals and requirements and what services are actually needed. Then it's we gather all the data um, to that we need to get out of prior service bureaus and into ours, and we really hold clients' hand and walk them through that to make sure they're staying on track and getting us the data that we needed or that we need to be able to get payroll started. Um, and then we do all of our configuration, our loading of data, and then we really one thing that's the key part that sets us apart is we don't just take your data and put it in as it is, right? We're going to put it in and we're going to test it. We're going to back into payroll tax numbers and make sure everything's correct. We don't just like to set up something that's wrong. We're going to make sure it's correct from the start so we don't start off with any issues or problems. So we really that's something we really thoroughly do on the back end is really you know uh, look at the data, what's coming through, and make sure it matches current, past, 941 TWC reports. So there's no discrepancies at the end of the year, no W-2 discrepancies at the end of the year, because we want to get started off on the right foot, because that could be why you're leaving your current provider. But it's just a really tailored white glove approach. Um, and then, after all the testing and everything, figure out, um, if there's any updates that need to be done and get those done. And then it's kind of go live and support, but we're there for our clients the whole time through this. We go on site for training,
Oh,
so that
nice.
way you really understand the system and kind of what you're doing in there. Follow up phone calls, and like I said, it's mainly the white glove approach and support after the fact, and then we're always available by email or phone call. Like I said, you'll get a live person every time you call, and then emails answered, within usually a 30-minute window. So we we just try to make it as easy and seamless as possible because we understand that you know business owners or HR people have other things going on too. So we want to try to be there to support that transition. Kind of going back old school. Get a pen and notepad and kind of set up pros and cons. What are the pros of doing it yourself? What are the cons of doing it yourself because you are growing? Assess your needs and your pain points. What are your challenges, errors? Have you had any missed deadlines, compliance worries, too much manual data entry? And then kind of list out what your requirements are and going forward and where you want to be, a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and kind of how you can get there. Consider employee count, your pay schedules, industry specific regulations that you might run into as you're growing. Then kind of just research payroll. Um, you know, it, Being in the state of Texas, look for Texas expertise, Texas specific. Local companies are always good because that's kind of their bread and butter. Automation and reliability. Obviously, as you're getting bigger, you want to try to automate some things to make it easier as well too. And then prioritize, what you want to do, based on that list. and then plan that transition thoughtfully, and maybe reach out and set up meetings with somebody. Where reach out to us, and we'd love to come out and talk to you, and figure out what it all looks like for you, and how we may be able to help you get there, or if we have a partner that may be able to help you get there as well too. So um, don't it's one of those things where if you get big, and you're getting overwhelmed with it, and mistakes start happening, and you're starting to receive IRS notices, sometimes you don't want to get there, because IRS notices and late payments and late penalties and interest can add up and start getting really expensive for your business. And I'm sure you'd rather, businesses would rather spend that money somewhere else than on IRS penalties and payments. So, getting out in front of it, so things like that don't happen.